the other thing about Run to the Hills, for me, that I'm not sure if people remark upon enough, is the fact that, when people discuss
This
Run to
is
the
when
Hills,
culture peaked. Hello, and welcome to Maiden Voyages, a podcast dedicated to exploring the never-ending discography of British metal titans Iron Maiden. This week, we're continuing our look into the band's third album, Number of the Beast, having covered the run-up to the release and the recruitment of legendary frontman Bruce Dickinson.
just a bit, mate.
Just a bit, okay. We're finally ready to talk about the music itself. Before we do that, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Sam, a writer of sorts, and I guess like a pretty general Iron Maiden fan. And I'm unfortunately always joined by...
Blev. Boo to that, unfortunately, bit. Boo to you.
That's fair.
I'm Blev, a historian of sorts and an Iron Maiden. Going to go for aficionado this time.
Aficionado,
Yeah.
nice. I mean, that's better than Addict, which you had last time,
yeah.
which took us into a dark place. Dark, twisted place.
Oh, it's dark. It's very dark.
So before we talk actual songs and track listing and all that jazz, I believe you have a quiz for me, and I have some facts.
Okay, yeah. Where do you want to start? Quiz or facts?
Quiz.
Okay,
Let's just get out of the way. Let's upset me.
2 questions this time after an appalling start.
All right.
0 out of 3.
You're writing these questions so I don't get them. That's the point.
You've got 2 chances to redeem yourselves. I'm hopeful about one of these.
Oh, great.
Okay, so question 1. Bruce Dickinson does not receive any writing credits on Number of the Beast, as we previously discussed.
Yeah.
But he is credited as having written 3 songs on what album that appeared in the same year as Number of the Beast?
I mean, I assume it's a Samson album.
It is. Do you know what Samson album was released in
No,
1982?
because as we established in the previous episode, I've never listened to Samson.
It's an album called Before the Storm that Bruce doesn't actually appear on, obviously because he's an Iron Maiden, but he does have writing credits on 3 songs.
Do I get half a point for that?
Yeah, go on.
All right, cool.
Half out of 4.
All right. When you phrase it like that, it sounds bad.
And the second question of this 2-question quiz is Paul Di'Anno's final release of Iron Maiden was the Maiden Japan live EP, but the original cover, or the intended cover, had to be slightly altered, in most territories at least. Why did the band have to alter the original cover?
Because doesn't it have Eddie holding up a beheaded head of Paul Di'Anno?
Oh,
allegedly Paul Di'Anno.
Yeah, I looked at it and I was like...
It looks nothing like Paul Di'Anno.
It looks nothing like him, yeah. But yes, spot on. That is the stated reason.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So I get a whole point.
You get a whole undisputed point.
So
yeah.
wait, stated reason? Are you implying there's something unstated?
No. But that's the reason the band stated.
That is very misleading.
Well, that's the reason they stated, and unless they
For
just
the stated reason and the actual reason.
I think that fact is a bit of a citation needed fact. It may well just be they looked at that and said, we don't like it. We prefer the one of him wielding a sword
with the blade.
But yes, certainly, sources undisclosed have said that the reason it was changed in most territories was because
Wikipedia
Wikipedia says it's meant to be.
Okay, there we go. I just want to establish the level of historianness you're bringing to this.
I'm sure I've heard it said elsewhere, but if anything, the internet forums that mention that are probably less reputable than Wikipedia. So
I think that's probably quite a good segue into the fact check then, or Pedant's Corner, as you have retitled it. To be honest, I don't have this much. I don't have that much this week. So looking at some of the stuff we stated in episode 4, so you flagged that you didn't think Twilight Zone, the single, was produced by Martin Birch, even though the album Killers was. You are correct. Instead, it's produced by Iron Maiden with engineer Nigel Hewitt. I think off the basis of like that King Diamond producer fact from last time, maybe the producer credit is just increasingly meaningless in the face of narcissistic rock stars.
Quite
Who
possibly,
knows?
yeah. That sounds very plausible.
And then the only other thing I had this week, so I'm sure there are probably other facts that I've missed in the episode, but at one point you, in the ending, you said, do you have a cute cat or dog? Tell us on social media. And this is not really a fact check, but I remember that you had a cute dog suitably named after an Iron Maiden song title when we were kids.
I did have a very cute dog called Trooper. Yeah.
So what I've always wondered, how did your family respond to a dog being called Trooper?
The more I think about
How
this...
did they let you call the dog Trooper?
Well, there was...
And also, rest in peace, Trooper. You were a very
rest
cute
in peace,
dog.
Trooper. You were, a really cute dog. There was a thing in my house. I only have one sibling, and we used to alternate when family pets came and went as to who got to name them.
Right.
So it was my turn to name this particular pet. And obviously I was a 14, 15-year-old Iron Maiden fan.
Yeah.
So Trooper's just, it was either that or Nico McBrain. And I think the family said...
I would respect calling an animal Nico McBrain.
So we settled on Trooper.
Okay.
And yeah, but having said that, the more
Were there any other names in the running?
No, you know what, weirdly, I wish I could take credit for that inspired decision, but I remember actually being out and about and hearing someone else call their dog Trooper. I have no idea if they're an Iron Maiden fan. They didn't look like an Iron Maiden fan.
Probably not. I mean, around Monmouth in South Wales is probably an ex-army
Probably.
person or someone who likes to pretend they're in the army.
Yeah, that sounds about
let's
right.
Be more real.
But yeah, so hence, yeah, Trooper, the very cute Shih Tzu dog.
Nice. Well, that's all I have for this week's fact check. Although, listeners, if you have a fact you want to dispute, please dispute it on Twitter. What's our handle?
Maiden Pod.
At Maiden Pod.
I can't believe that wasn't already taken.
No, that is shocking.
It is quite shocking. And you know what? As an added treat, listener, maybe I'll see if I can find a picture of Trooper the Shih Tzu
Nice.
to put on the social media feed.
Yeah, definitely be the thumbnail for this episode of the podcast.
with a big R.I.P. in memoriam. In the week the Queen's died, we still mourn the loss of Trooper the dog.
Yeah, awkward.
Moving
on swiftly.
Some songs.
Yay!
Some really good songs.
Yay!
So, Number of the Beast, the album, kicks off with Invasion.
Invaders!
Yeah. Dear. Well, you know what? I've listened to this album a lot over the years, and I always thought Invasion was...
It's not Invasion, it's Invaders.
You sure? I've written down Invasion.
I'm going to look it up.
Oh, I know. Am I thinking of the B-side, aren't I? Off the early... Yes. So... Oh, this is embarrassing.
This is a live fact check. Iron Maiden historian Blevin does not know the first song title of Number of the Beast. It's Invaders, mate.
In the previous episode, I called myself an Iron Maidenologist. Oh.
Well, you have been stripped of your title.
Dear me. Sorry, Invaders.
Hand in your badge and gun.
Not to be confused with Invasion, which was the B-side to one of the singles off the first album.
Yeah.
And lyrically mines exactly the same territory of Vikings, invading
stuff.
Yeah, Norsemen are coming, and this is about Vikings invading stuff. I used to think this was a really, just not a disappointing, but it's just an odd start to the album. I have revised these thoughts since.
Okay.
But now I think I appreciate it more in the sense that it does the job, right? Because it's high octane, nice dramatic, staccato snare, and then very high-paced. It's nice and short and snappy. It's not compositionally the strongest song on this album, is it?
No.
And Steve Harris admits that himself. I read a quote from Steve where he basically said, yeah, Invasion ended up in the album. We didn't think it was as strong as the rest of the material, but we didn't have anything else. And I was just thinking, so you put it as track one? Like, at the time? And he's
that's a weird choice.
He's telling the truth, because Invasion... I was working this out. It's the only opening track of an Iron Maiden album
Invaders.
Dear my God. Invaders is the only...
Don't worry, I'll edit this episode and just put a really awkward... Yeah, the song Invaders.
Just me flagellating myself. Pull it together, Blethen. Pull it together. But Invaders is the only opening track of an Iron Maiden album the band have never played live.
Yeah, and so I think it's an interesting opening track in that it does get a lot of scorn. Iron Maiden don't play it live. It's probably not the strongest foot forward, which is a weird choice, but it is a high energy and interesting starting point for the album because it's a good showcase for Bruce's voice. Like, it's the aggiest I think Bruce sounds on the album. It's the kind of song that just, it's very straightforward and just is quite punchy, and I think maybe that's why they start off with it. I think it's also, and maybe Iron Maiden would disagree with this, but I think in terms of song composition, it is the closest thing on this album to the first two albums.
Exactly. And we've not had this conversation before, just a little peek behind the curtain, but my thoughts exactly. I would go as far as to say that Invaders is the last new wave of British heavy metal song Iron Maiden write.
Interesting.
Like, it is the end of, it's the final note of Nwabam Maiden. What we have now is it no longer fits that Nwabam tag, but weirdly Invaders does. And you're right, it is the only song on this record you could
the connective tissue between Iron Maiden of old and Number of the Beast Iron Maiden. And that's why I was asking in the last episode when you were talking about recording if they were just coming in with completely fresh material, because this song feels like a leftover of that era.
It does, yeah, and I've never heard that being said, but it's interesting that lyrically and the title is closely recycled from that not particularly great B-side, and that that appears in the Soundhouse tapes as well. But
well, you heard it here first, folks. We are having fresh Iron Maiden analysis on a 40-year-old album.
Hot takes.
Well, lukewarm at best. Probably ice cold, let's be fair.
But yeah, I used to be quite down on Invaders. And actually, I remember, going back to that chat at the start of the last episode about first hearing Run to the Hills, getting this album, and getting the album home. I'd literally only heard Run to the Hills, right? The rest of this was all totally new to me.
Yeah.
And Invaders coming on and being like, oh, okay, yeah, this is high energy. Well, it's not as good as Run to the Hills, though. And
the chorus is hilarious, though.
Yeah, but it's the chorus that
it's
undoes
the riff,
song.
Scales.
Yeah, and I've certainly thought to it a lot more, and actually I appreciate it a lot more now. Yeah, it's an interesting start, and it plays into... This makes me sound like I'm about to be really down on Number of the Beast, which is obviously not going to happen. But one of the few criticisms I have in this album is, bar the final track, the track listing is literally like someone has put these songs into a random order generator.
No, I'm with you. I think the flow of the album is quite bizarre.
It's weird.
And actually that leads us really well into the next song, Children of the Damned. What a choice for a second song.
Because it's so obviously track 4 or 5, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's that mid-album, where Strange World is on the debut album.
Yeah.
Like that end of side A, beginning of side B, that sort of mid-album lull. Yeah, and yet here it's track 2.
But Maiden have form for this, right? Because it is such a radical change of pace for the album. Like you said before, though, in a previous episode, there's a through line in songwriting style from Remember Tomorrow to this.
Yes,
and Remember Tomorrow is the second track on the first album. Yeah. So, again, maybe this is Iron Maiden trying to say, I'm reading far too much into it, but maybe they're just trying to mold themselves on previous precedent whilst also displaying how different they are at the same time.
Yeah, and I presume that is the rationale behind it. And yet, no matter how many, I dread to think how many times I've listened to Number of the Beast, but I'm always surprised when Children of the Damned comes in tracks 2.
So am I.
I
found that re-listening to the album. It's like, I thought this was in the middle of the album. Like, what's this doing here? Have I got a messed up CD?
But all that aside, they get away with it because it's just such a great song.
Yeah, to be honest, and I think we'll probably say this for a lot of the material in the album, is it doesn't really matter where the hell it is. It's just good. Although I would say Children of the Damned is one of my absolute favourite tracks from the record.
Okay.
It's slow, it's creepy, it's melodic. It's, again, an incredible showcase for Bruce, but it's also a really good example of what makes Bruce's voice so different to Paul. And it's a really strong statement because that's sort of the mix of the the sort of more mellow crooning combined with the air raid siren screaming and the panicked ending vocals, like, just show Bruce's versatility in one track. Yeah, it's just awesome.
And that's it for me. It's when it kicks up that gear of the dun 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 dun.
Like, the way it escalates is great.
That is brilliant.
As a random aside, there's a very good cover of this with Sebastian Bach on vocals. Works really well.
I'll have to check that out. I'm not
on one of the many Iron Maiden tribute albums.
There are a lot of them. For a final random aside, Bruce has said that the song Children of the Damned was somewhat inspired by, well, lyrically it's inspired by the film Children of the Damned.
Right.
But musically inspired by the Black Sabbath song Children of the Sea.
Ah, that's interesting. Dio era.
Yeah, Dio era. And you can sort of see it, the minor, clean acoustic chords going into the big lumbering riff. But yeah, we are on the, like, Invasion is okay, cool, high tempo.
Invaders, for God's sake, man.
I'm literally going to take myself outside and shoot myself in the head.
I mean, I don't care, but I know it's bothering you to be corrected, so I'm lapping it up.
Oh God. So yeah, Invaders is that somewhat superfluous, but it does the job. And then Children of the Damned, you feel like you're getting into the meat of the album, right? It's like, okay, here we go. Leading on to The Prisoner, which is noteworthy as Adrian Smith's first writing credit on an Iron Maiden album. Yeah, credited to Smith and Harris. What do you reckon? What do you make of The Prisoner?
Well, I mean, firstly, the opening is iconic. Like, obviously, taking samples from the TV show the song is based off of.
Love that. Yeah.
I am not a number. I am a free man. Is great. Yeah. And although, to be fair, every time I hear it nowadays, I just think of the Fozzy cover of it, where it's Chris Jericho and the bandmates of Stuck Mojo impersonating British accents and doing those samples, and it's just really funny. But yeah, I think what's interesting about the song is the opening of it after the samples is far more groovy than a lot of Iron Maiden material. And like Clive Burr's rhythm approach really sets a sort of fun pace for a deep purpley riff before everything explodes into just going, here's an Iron Maiden riff, enjoy Iron Maiden all the time. And like those Maiden-y verses and the sort of really disarmingly melodic chorus, just it all flows so well. And I really love in that chorus, like, whilst you have Bruce being super melodic, you have this really cool rising bass line. It just adds to an odd sense of serenity in the song, which, you know, fits The Prisoner perfectly.
Well, yeah. And funny you mentioned Clive Burr's sort of drumming in that song, because Bruce Dickinson actually claims he wrote the drum beat.
Really?
Well, I don't know. Like,
really, Bruce?
It seems odd because Bruce has always fancied himself as like an amateur drummer, and he says they were not
like Dave Mustaine saying he wrote everything Metallica released in the 80s.
I think it'd be an odd thing to fabricate, I think. And also, you know, there were other people there. He says he was just knocking about the drums, and the opening beat is not complicated, right? It's the sort of thing an amateur drummer might play.
No, true.
And then he said Adrian Smith was just there and just quite a spontaneous thing, comes up with the da-na-na-na-na, and away they go. Yeah. But the melodic aspect of the song, I think, is significant in the sense that this is Adrian's first contribution, and The Prisoner is the most, in terms of the chorus, it's the most overly melodic thing Maiden have ever done up until this point, right?
Yeah, it is the poppiest Maiden chorus.
Yeah, and this is what Maiden is. Yeah, exactly. This is what Adrian. I think I said Madrian then. Madrian Smith.
Welcome to Iron Maiden.
But this is what Adrian Smith is going to bring, right? And this unlocks so many other avenues for Maiden, I think. Like that, you know, Adrian isn't afraid of just totally embracing something that's super melodic in a way that I think Steve is always kind of, on the edge. We can't push too far into that territory. But Adrian's got no qualms about it, right? He's just like embracing it for what it's worth. And
one thing I did find re-listening to it, and to be honest, it's something I find with a lot of this album, is it's much slower than I remember.
You know what?
In my head, it's really fast.
But my theory is because we're so used to live versions of a lot of these songs, and they're so much faster live.
Potentially.
Well, wait till we get to Hallowed Be Thy Name, because that's the one. But so we're almost at the end of side A. It's amazing how this record's like 40 minutes long.
Yeah,
it seems to fly by.
Yeah, so I was listening to it earlier today, shortly before we did this recording, and it was over in an instant. It was like, it's fantastic, but where's it gone?
But it's a standard length of the album at the time. But you're right, it just flies by. We're already on to track 4, 22 Acacia Avenue. Before we go to thoughts, can I give you a bit of Adrian Smith's background to the recording of the song?
Yes, you can.
So Adrian Smith says 22 Acacia Avenue. Again, this is another Smith Harris writing credit. 22 Acacia Avenue was something I came up with when I was very young. One of those first songs you write. I had this band Urchin and we did this song called 22. We were getting stuff ready for the Number of the Beast, and out of the blue, Steve turned to me and said, "What was that song you used to do in Urchin?" "Oh, blimey, Governor, what was that song you used to do in Urchin?"
Don't do that.
And he started humming it, and it was 22. It ended up being on the record. So yeah, this, Steve Harris gets a writing credit. I wonder if maybe what Harris brought is the midsection.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of like
that sounds very Harrisy.
In it.
Yeah. But it seems the bare bones of the song was something Adrian had, well, as he said himself, since he was very young.
So what do you think of the song?
One of my faves.
Yeah.
Like, and I remember actually when I got this when I was 13 and loving Run to the Hills, the first few songs, I was like, okay, this is good. I've totally reevaluated that opinion now. I mean, Children of the Damned is not just good, but, this was me getting into metal as well. It was a bit much. It was when 22 Acacia Avenue came on, I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. And in a way, a very simple song for a lot of it.
Sort of. But also,
the meat and bones of it are quite simple. Yeah, well, until you get to the midsection. But, the verse and chorus are very... It's just like 3 chords, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, similar to you, it's one of the songs that the first time I heard it, it really made me stand up and pay attention. And, by nature of when I was discovering a lot of this music, I heard this song well before I heard the whole album, Number of the Beast, because someone sent me it on MSN, because that's how I discovered a lot of songs back then. But yeah, this is probably one of my all-time favorite Maiden songs. The way it constantly changes pace, really, it's a really strong example of Maiden developing that sort of narrative musical approach that we've touched on a couple of times before, and all of its little sections flow together really, really well. Whether they're slow, they're fast, or mid-pace, it all clicks, and what it makes me think of is the discussion we had about Phantom of the Opera. And my issue with Phantom of the Opera, as much as I like it, is that things don't feel very smooth. Everything feels really smooth here. It's like they deliver on the promise of something like Phantom of the Opera, which is smashing 3 songs together and it being seamless. So yeah, musically, I think it's incredible. Story itself, it's not aged so well.
It's Maiden being sexy again, isn't it?
We're back to demonizing sex workers.
We're back to Charlotte the Harlot. We're back to sexy Maiden.
But now with an extra weird note of white knighting, and trying to quote unquote save a sex worker from what sounds like quite a lucrative job, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're Adrian Smith and co are painting the protagonist of the song as an aspirational figure either. But yeah, when you get to an admittedly incredibly good refrain of beat her, mistreat her, it's kind of listening to it as a 33-year-old is kind of ooh, that's a bit weird.
Yeah. I did read, I found an old interview from Steve at the time where he talks about Maiden lyrics, and he talks about them really being personal. And he says when they do touch upon subjects like love and sex, he said, like 22 Acacia Avenue, he said it's meant to be tongue-in-cheek, which is not a defence per se, but at least you can sort of go, okay. But also, yeah. It's a part of it, I think, is pandering to their audience, who are young teenage men, and then they are young men.
Brothels.
Well, but who want sort of cheap titillation? You know what I mean? That's what it is. But that's musically, it's so strong.
Yeah, it's still an incredible track. Yeah. It's just, if you delve too much into the lyrics nowadays, it doesn't sit brilliantly.
And it's interesting that
it's not as weird. Well, it is as weird as Charlotte the Harlot.
Yeah, and it's interesting
Prowler.
And, well, bizarrely, until you get to No Prayer for the Dying in 1990, this is essentially the last instance of Maiden doing this, like, "Poor girls, prostitutes" type lyric.
Yeah,
It disappears for the next 8 years until it's weirdly revived and then quickly dropped again, thank God.
Yeah.
The only
Steve Harris discovers poetry.
Yeah, but the only thing that makes me sad about the lyric is I honestly think the lyric is the only reason they don't play it live anymore.
Do they not play it live at all anymore?
No, I've never seen Maiden. All the times I've seen Maiden, I believe the last time it was aired was in 2000.
Yeah.
I think very shortly after Bruce. Oh, sorry, I lied. Potentially 2003, just before the Dance of Death tour. But it's not had an airing in 20
I
years
could
now.
see why they would take it out of rotation because of the lyrics.
Ditto the other slightly problematic songs, Bringing Your Daughter to the Slaughter, again, not since 2003. I think they've just dropped that stuff.
And like, I'm sure we'll touch on it more in a future episode, but something like Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter is so comically violent that it's hard to take it seriously. Whereas something like 22 Acacia Avenue is, whilst I wouldn't necessarily call it realistic, it's much more down to earth in a sort of, these are maybe problematic views, as opposed to Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, which is kind of like,
silly.
I have seen a slasher film, and boy, did I enjoy it.
Yeah, 22 Acacia Avenue is definitely a bit more icky, should we put it that way.
Yeah, icky is a good word.
But, I mean, musically, like, phenomenal. Absolutely great.
I have a question for you.
Go on.
Do you know where the name Acacia Avenue comes from?
Well, I know it's a sort of, it's like John Doe, isn't it? It's like generic street name.
Yeah.
But I don't know where it comes from.
No, so that's basically all I got. Oh. I never realised that until like last
it's like
week.
Joe Blogs,
Wikipedia says Acacia Avenue is a cliche in British culture. It is a placeholder name for an unexceptional middle-class suburban street.
Oh, okay.
I never knew that. There are also at least 60 Acacia Avenues in the UK.
And that must mean there are several, 20...
there are 60 Charlotte the Harlots out there.
Imagine just being able to fill in every form of like your address is 22 Acacia Avenue, and every once in a while you'll get a Maiden fan who'll go, 22 Avenue.
Almost 100% sure that after recording this episode, Blevin is going to go home, Google Maps Acacia Avenues, figure out where he can move to.
Got to get my dusty copy of the Yellow Pages out. Start looking.
As long as one of them's in Wales, Blev's going to live there.
Sorted. So, and it's interesting, this album, it's kind of rising, isn't it? Like there's a sort of crescendo through side one. Invasion, good, okay, does the job. Children of the Damned, oh hello, Prisoner, oh this is a bit different. 22 Acacia Avenue, Christ, this is great. And then, in old money, flip your vinyl over, you're on to side B, you get to track 5, and it's only Number of the Bloody Beast. I mean...
My lord.
I find it... the side B of this album is staggering anyway, but...
Yeah.
Incredible that you've got songs like Number of the Beast. I just can't imagine what it must have been like buying that, at the time of release, flipping over, you get that amazing... Old Testament spoken word intro of the Woe to You, O Earth and Sea.
Yeah.
And into the lovely, bass and guitar, both playing the riff together. And yeah, I mean, it's just a classic, isn't it, really?
I mean, again, like similar to Acacia Avenue, what I love about it is it's Iron Maiden delivering on that promise of a musical narrative. Like the whole song feels like a storytelling experience. And I think in particular, those first 2 minutes where you have the opening recitation and then you have like this slow build up that sounds sort of like Bruce Dickinson standing around a campfire, but like in hushed voices, and the song builds up and you have one guitar kick in, you have 2 guitars kick in. The way it develops and evolves in those 2 minutes is just incredible. And then obviously... Then you have Bruce screaming, yeah, and everything kicks off. It's great. Yeah,
and Bruce likes to tell the story about Martin Birch. And we haven't even touched on the production yet, but this again is a step up from Killers for me, production-wise.
Yeah.
And, it's not like... I don't even think the studio's changed. The producer hasn't changed, but for whatever reason, they just nail a much thicker,
Yeah.
just sounds weightier, doesn't it? You know,
And that's
like,
what you need, especially when you have a chorus that's just screaming 6,
Yeah.
6, 6. Like, you need that weight behind it. Otherwise, it just feels a bit twee.
And from all accounts, Martin Birch, that, and I'm going to use the word iconic, but that iconic Bruce Dickinson scream, you know, going into the second verse, sorry. You know, Martin Birch apparently pushed him to do take after take after take to the point where he was literally about to come to blows with Birch. But yeah, what an amazing vocal performance.
Yeah, it's an amazing, like, that scream is incredible, and as you say, iconic. It's also so good that no wonder you never see it replicated perfectly live.
Well, yeah.
Like,
I mean, come on, yeah.
That
Especially
is
now, bless him.
Yeah, that is definitely trapping lightning. What's the expression?
Lightning in a bottle.
Lightning in a bottle,
Yeah,
that's the one.
Moments in
Trapping
time.
lightning.
Yeah, it's
Jesus.
like, you know, lightning on a string. That's the expression.
Pocket lightning. It's pocket lightning. So you mentioned the iconic intro. Who's that read by?
Who's that read? The actor who read it is not notable enough to have a Wikipedia page.
Ah. Do you know who was meant to originally read it, or who they wanted to have it?
Oh, I did know this, but remind me.
Vincent Price.
Vincent Price, yes.
Like, in the same way that, like, Black Widow by Alice Cooper opens with Vincent Price talking a lot about spiders in a fantastic performance. But it turns out that Vincent Price was too expensive for Iron Maiden.
I mean, fair enough.
Which, particularly at this point as well, like, Iron Maiden are successful, but not mega bucks.
Yeah. But it's, you know, I can't imagine there aren't many Iron Maiden fans who just can't recite that opening thing off by heart.
I would definitely get some words wrong.
Really?
Yeah.
Woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil sends a beast of wrath, because he knows the time is short. Let him who have understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. It's number 666. Yeah.
I love that.
Final thought for me on Number of the Beast, though. I also think we've had some phenomenal guitar playing from Dennis Stratton, the first album, Dave Murray throughout, Adrian Smith.
Yeah.
Number of the Beast is the first time I think the guitar solo is, I keep using this word iconic. I know I'm devaluing the word in doing so, but it feels like an iconic solo. It feels like, you know, one of those solos that's a kind of contender for, you know, Total Guitar's greatest guitar solos of all time solos.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to, but I could hum that solo by both of them if I wanted to. And as much as there's been some dazzling guitar playing, I feel like
I can
this
hum
is
some of it. No, please stop. That wasn't a challenge.
Oh, right.
God.
Sorry. Yeah, maybe you can just drop a bit of it in. That might be better. But yeah, I feel like Number of the Beast is the first time they kind of nail that.
Yeah.
And as if that isn't, you know, one iconic track, just being silly now, from Number of the Beast into Run to the Hills.
So wait, where's the end of side A?
Oh, so end of side A, that was 22 Acacia Avenue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
right.
we
So
flipped.
you start side B with Number of the Beast.
Yeah, mad.
Wow.
Why is that not track one?
Yeah, that would make a lot more sense if I'm honest.
Stick Invasion as the start of side B.
Invaders, for God's sake, man.
I just need to edit my notes, don't I? Or just stop talking about it. Anyway, Run to the Hills.
Banger, you can't beat that rising chorus and the gallopy verses. Nothing sounds quite like it. The drums are iconic. I mean, I've never really given Clive Burr the credit he deserved until we started doing this podcast. But I think his feel is really pivotal in giving these songs their groove and stopping them from becoming too gridlocked, which I think is something that kind of happens a bit with Iron Maiden. And then also, I think my favourite part of the entire song is towards the end, where it's just Bruce going, yeah, yeah, and just building and like, oh, it's all silly, isn't it? It's great. It's a very silly song.
It's very silly lyrically, but also I think, and I wonder if this is because of the pressure Steve was under to write this material, because Steve still carries, you know, he's got Adrian chipping in now, but he carries the burden of the songwriting responsibility here. I wonder if that time pressure forced him to simplify things a little bit in places.
Yeah.
Because Run to the Hills is a very simple song compared to a lot of what we've heard on the first two albums.
Yeah.
It's, literally riff, verse, chorus, bridge, verse, it's proper simple. The riff is nothing complicated. There's nothing about it that's particularly technically challenging. And yet you wonder if this is when Steve realizes, I can kind of write pop metal bangers here. I've got a real ear for melody. It doesn't need to be.
I have talent.
Yeah, but I think he knew it. He like writing stuff like the Phantom of the Opera riff.
There's a shift to hooks in a way that hadn't been present on the first two albums. Like there was some hooks there, but nothing like this.
Nothing like this, and also it's stuff like Run to the Hills where you realise, God bless Paul Di'Anno, couldn't do that.
So funny you should say that, but
don't.
The clip of Paul Di'Anno I mentioned in the last episode where, he's banging on about Iron Maiden being punk. He's saying that in response to someone heckling him about Bruce Dickinson, and so he gives us a little bit of a taster of what he would sound like on this album.
I'm sorry, I don't sing opera. Run to the hill. Too fucking easy, and I'm not gay. This is punk.
Yeah, it's not great because he immediately follows that okay performance with being a big homophobe. But
I mean, that's not great.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
I'm glad we got Bruce. He may have issues, but he's much better.
Yeah, and also let's be honest, this is the first time Maiden have penned a song that exists in that world that very few songs inhabit. Enter Sandman, like a genuine best of heavy
it's an
metal.
Anthem.
It is an anthem, yeah. It's a sort of song that, and I find it mad to think that I'd not heard it until the age of 12, 13 in retrospect, because now it just feels like a part of the furniture. But unlike some of those other songs, unlike your Enter Sandmans, your Sweet Child of Mine's, good songs that when they come on, I think, okay, yes, still a good song, don't need to hear it again. I don't actually tire of Run to the Hills. It's not as ubiquitous as those songs, admittedly, but I don't really tire of it.
I think that's an interesting thing about Iron Maiden as a whole, right? Is that even their biggest stuff will never be as ubiquitous as
Paranoid, Smoke in the Water.
Yeah, for whatever reason, those proliferate the mainstream more than Iron Maiden. Like, even though Iron Maiden is probably quite demonstrably one of, if not top 3 biggest bands on the planet in terms of rock and metal, they're not revered in the way that Metallica is or Guns N' Roses. And because of that, there's slightly less burnout with their material in terms of the public sphere of pop culture.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I think Maiden are quite savvy about it. The obvious thing to do if you're Iron Maiden from this point on is Run to the Hills would always be your encore or the last song of the set. Yeah. And actually, you're not even guaranteed to hear it. More often than not, you will. But
I mean, the first time I saw Maiden, they didn't play it.
Yeah,
I was pretty upset.
Well, I've seen Maiden, about over 10 times, and I can probably think of 3-4 instances where they haven't played Run to the Hills, and that, I guess that can be annoying for a casual fan.
This might be a rant for another day, but I think that's unacceptable.
Well, no, but they keep it, because when you go see Metallica, they play Enter Sandman. By that point, I'm almost a bit like, I wouldn't, but I'd think, all right, I might just go get my coat now and just. I've heard this so many times. I don't
know.
Really? Okay. Well,
I like Enter Sandman. It's not like my favorite Metallica song by any stretch, but the vibe to it, because it has that pop culture cachet, it feels big. And the same with something like Run to the Hills, it feels big when you hear it. And whilst I take the point that you don't want to wear it out, at the same time, like, if you're paying to see Iron Maiden, they should play Run to the Hills and Number of the Beast.
Well, I'm not going to
obviously I'm not in Iron Maiden and I don't call the
so.
shots, and I wouldn't say that to Steve's face.
Also, the other thing about Run to the Hills for me that I'm not sure if people remark upon enough is the fact that when people discuss Run to the Hills,
culture peaked.
Yeah, when Melvin Bragg is at the South Bank, discussing the Iron Maiden discography, it's really the first proper instance and utilisation of what comes to be the quintessential Maiden thing, the gallop. Yeah, I'm not saying they've never done it before, but it's kind of fleeting here and there. It hasn't appeared so far on this album, has it? Think about it. Hasn't appeared.
Number of the Beast is a little gallopy, not as gallopy.
No, staccato-y. It's just... It's not nothing like that. And there's
I'm gonna have to refer to the source material.
But considering this,
but yes, nothing as gallopy.
Yeah, and also this is, people who don't like Maiden tend to criticize them a lot as being like, oh, it's just like someone riding a horse and a guitar. Whereas you don't hear a lot of it actually up until this point, and then it becomes a bit more of a motif in their music.
I would also challenge anyone to ride a horse and play guitar at the same time and to do tight galloping riffs, because that sounds very difficult.
But yeah, so as well as being we'll discuss it as a single, it's a big breakout hit of this album, but yeah, classic, isn't it? And talking of classics, on track 7, Gangland.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing I'd say in Gangland's defense, if I was going to put it anywhere in this album, I would put it as second last track. It's where the song belongs.
Why put it at all?
Well, yeah.
I kind of like Gangland. Like, it's not a terrible song by any stretch, but it's definitely the album's most throwaway track. And every time I think of it in my head of like, oh, yeah, I quite like Gangland because it's got this sort of jazzy vibe, I realise I'm not thinking of Gangland on Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden. I am thinking of Dream Theater covering the entirety of Number of the Beast, and they turn Gangland into this cool jazzy belter. Yeah, and it works much better because the whole song is jazz hands.
They do make something really cool out of it.
Yeah.
Listening back to it again, it was less objectionable than I remember it being.
I wouldn't object to it. It's just a bit flat.
Yeah, it is a bit flat, and it's one of those songs that needs a chorus to come and rescue it, and the chorus doesn't arrive.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
But, worth noting, it's Clive Burr's only songwriting credit on a Maiden song.
Maybe that explains something.
well,
sorry, Clive.
Oddly, it's a Clive Burr and Adrian Smith composition, so it's actually the only track on this album. Rather,
I mean, it's also
Steve Harris doesn't have a writing credit on.
In terms of songwriting credits, it's a tough gig being a drummer, because on this episode and when we're talking about Killers, I've talked about how Clive Burr's feel for rhythm really elevates a lot of Iron Maiden material. But if you're contributing drum parts, typically that gets credited as arrangement rather than songwriting.
Yeah.
And it's a weird distinction, because Run to the Hills would probably sound a bit rubbish with like a standard drum beat opening it up, right? It's having that groove to it that really elevates it. So I don't have much of a conclusion.
Well, we'll get to this later on.
Being a drummer sucks.
Because it's significant. But Steve Harris claims that if he has a sole writing credit on the song, Steve Harris has said in the past that means he writes basically everything.
But basically is the key word.
Well,
right?
yeah. Well, but I'm not. That isn't a direct quote there. He may well have said everything, but he says virtually everything or basically everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, Gangland. It's. Well, actually, no. Let's not. I'm trying to think of something nice to say about it. It's not bad.
It's fine.
It's fine.
It's benign.
But the problem is it's on such an incredible record.
It's below Invaders in terms of quality for me.
Yes, I would agree, actually, in hindsight, yeah, and I'm not sure I would have once said that, but it is the album's weak point, and, of course, there is an alternative world in which the B-side to Run to the Hills, Total Eclipse, is on this album, and that's a different story altogether, but we'll hang on to the Total Eclipse thoughts until we get to the singles, perhaps, but
okay.
I think it's fair to say we both would replace Gangland with Total Eclipse.
Yeah, that's just unquestionable.
Bringing us on to the final track 8, and we spoke about the fairly dodgy running order of this album. Yeah. The one thing that makes total sense to me is Hallowed Be Thy Name, final song.
Yeah.
May as well say it now, right off the bat. Iron Maiden's finest hour up until this point. Maybe Iron Maiden's finest hour ever.
Yeah. I am pretty much in agreement with that. I mean, I think the points I made earlier about 22 Acacia Avenue feeling like Phantom of the Opera, but, you know, getting the glue between the bits right applies even more so to Hallowed Be Thy Name. Like, this is such a brilliantly constructed song and has so many definably iconic moments to it, whether it's the delivery of Bruce going like running low over a change of guitar riffs and then escalating, whether it's the jiggy guitar riff of da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, or whether it's like Bruce's really panicked delivery in the verses. It all just sets such a great picture, and it's just such a great song.
And it's just the way the riffs sort of subtly shift and morph and build on each other. And there's particularly, and it's, you know, it's all Steve's work, but the way guitar refrains you've heard before, but are subtly kind of reinterpreted. So the whole thing seems to have a sense of movement. It's not that verse, chorus thing. It's kind of building and building and building into something that is, just like this really climatic ending with this almost like cinematic, like you said, I'm one of those people who say Phantom of the Opera could be my favourite Iron Maiden song, right?
Sure,
but the cinematic sense of drama they get with Hallowed Be Thy Name, I can see that being the realisation of what they were going for then.
Yeah, definitely. And I think your point about movement is really important. The whole song, despite it being, like 7 minutes or something, has such a strong sense of momentum to it. You're always moving forward in the song because of those permutations on existing riffs. Like, it never feels stale. Not to like get on a pedestal, but you compare it to more recent Iron Maiden where riffs do stagnate because they get repetitive. Everything keeps shifting here. You're never on solid ground, and that's really exciting for a listener.
Yeah, and, you know, coupled with like phenomenal shifts from Dave Murray and Adrian Smith.
Yeah.
Not just in the solos, but the riffs, the playing, and the wonderful trade-offs you get in the solo section between the two of them. And we said this about Killers as well, but that real sense of, you know, the way that, you know, the sort of the both guitars pan slightly to different sides, so you get that real sense of the personalities of the two.
And that slight like live sound.
Yeah, it's when you think how young they were. Paul Di'Anno's 23 when he left Iron Maiden, right?
Yeah.
So I presume the rest of them are similar age. You think, dear God, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, I wasn't achieving this when I was 23.
No. No, I didn't write Hallowed Be Thy Name when I was 23.
No. I think for both of us at that point, all we had for our writing credits was our band from when we were kids, Sycorax, releasing the song End Your Life, Please.
Yes. Maybe not quite the game-changing record we hoped it would be.
Turns out South Wales wasn't ready for it.
But yeah, and just also, Hallowed Be Thy Name marks a kind of tradition, doesn't it? With Maiden albums ending on grandiose epic tracks. And we can argue if Maiden ever better it, but this does start a kind of, well, tradition's a nice way of saying it. Formula would be a slightly more critical interpretation.
Let's go with trope.
Yeah, trope.
That's more neutral.
The final song, and also it has to be a Steve Harris song. Like the Harris epic is the last song, and that begins here. And we had differing opinions about Drifter from Killers as the final track on the Killers album.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's unanimous here, isn't it? Brilliant.
Yeah. Fantastic ending to an album. It ends it on such incredible high.
So I think we both agree Hallowed Be Thy Name is not a bit of a classic, an absolute classic Maiden track.
Yeah, it's one of the defining songs of their oeuvre. However you say that word.
Their vibe, the Maiden vibe.
It's the Maiden vibe. Let's be less pretentious.
And as a final thought, I thought it might be worth noting that Metal Hammer magazine recently did quite an extensive readers' poll of the top 50 Iron Maiden songs as voted for by the public. And at number 1, Hallowed Be Thy Name, the best Maiden song of all time.
Yeah, I mean, I could probably just about get on board with that. It's not my all-time favourite, but objectively, it's an incredibly strong Maiden offering.
It's definitely in the running, isn't it?
Yeah, it would be top 5 for me, for sure.
And if you said Hallowed Be My Name is the best Maiden song of all time, I don't really have an argument
I'm not
against that.
I'm not going to fight you.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? So with the album proper covered off, we're going to wrap things up for the second part of our Number of the Beast coverage. However, don't fret, we've got another episode of the album coming up, So join us next time for all the plagiarism controversy around Hallowed Be Thy Name, the singles, and a whole lot more.